Okay, thank you, Gina, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's webinar will be discussing ways that you can use Project Outcome for academic libraries to assess the learning outcomes of library instruction. My name is Sara Goek. I am Mellon ACLS Public Fellow and Program Manager at ACRL. And with me today is Eric Ackermann, Head of Reference Services at Radford University and also the Chair of ACRL's Project Outcome for Academic Libraries Task Force. To start off, if you haven't already had a chance, you can sign up for Project Outcome. It's at acrl.projectoutcome.org. If you experience any problems in the registration process, please just send us an email, acrl@projectoutcome.org, and Gina or I can help you out to make sure that you can get registered and get set up to go. So to give us a sense of where we are starting from, how many of you are already familiar with Project Outcome? If you could just click on the raise hand icon that you have and let us know so we have some sense where we're starting from. Okay, it looks like from what I'm seeing, it's maybe not quite half. So hopefully whether you've had a chance to check out what's in the toolkit already or you're just learning a bit more today, you'll learn something from today's session. To make sure we are all starting from the same point, just a brief introduction to what is in the toolkit. Project Outcome for Academic Libraries is a free toolkit. It's available to all academic and research librarians as well as LIS students. And it's designed to help academic libraries understand and share the impact of essential library services and programs. We provide simple surveys and an easy-to-use process for measuring and analyzing outcomes. Project Outcome also provides libraries with resources and training support to help you apply your results and advocate for your library's future. And one thing that I like to emphasize in these presentations is that this toolkit is really for everyone. It's not only for people with assessment in your job titles or descriptions. So I'm assuming many of you here today maybe are active instruction librarians, and we hope that there will be something in these tools that will help you in your roles. Project Outcome for Academic Libraries is based on a model developed and tested by the Public Library Association, which has been in the field since 2015. So we're learning a lot from them, and we're working together with them to continue to improve as we go along. So today's session, I will talk just a little bit about what's in the toolkit itself. We're not going to focus really in any great detail on the functionality. If you haven't had a chance to attend one of our introductory webinars or workshops, you can find recordings and other resources online that will help you learn how to specifically do different things within the tool. We're going to focus more today on what it is and what you can do with it. And Eric will be talking about both how the task force designed the tool and also how he plans to implement Project Outcome at his library. If you have any questions as we go along, please do type them in the chat. There are also a few places where we'll stop and try and have a little bit of a discussion as well, and we'll be sure to reserve time for questions at the end. So to start off, we're talking about measuring impact, and what that means is measuring outcomes that arise from library programs or services that demonstrate changes an individual perceives in themselves and changes in individual or groups' opportunities or lives. It's about helping libraries assess and communicate that impact and therefore also communicate their value to the institutions and communities that they serve. So traditionally, libraries have often measured things that are relatively straightforward to count. Gate counts, usage metrics, web traffic analytics, these sorts of transactional data points. Also, have relied a lot on intuition or anecdotal evidence. Unfortunately, in this day and age, that's not always enough, and that doesn't always give us enough either to continue to improve and to act on that data. So we need more data and more evidence to be able to talk in a more convincing way about impact. The challenge, of course, is that everyone's needs are going to be a little bit different depending on reporting requirements and just context. Everyone is pressed for time, resources are limited, and it can also be there can be disconnects between what gets measured and what's important to measure, or what's really key in terms of the type of evidence and data that you can collect and use. So what we are talking about is measuring outcomes. And for the purposes of project outcome, we define an outcome as a specific benefit from a library program or service. It can be quantitative or qualitative, and it's expressed as changes an individual perceives in themselves. It answers the question, what good did we do? Another way of putting it is, how have our learners been changed as a result of our interactions? And outcomes aren't so focused on recording offerings or usage, things like collection counts, or for example, the number of instruction sessions you offer or the number of students who might come to those instruction sessions, but rather on documenting how the library impacts the learning and work of its users. So it's, what do those students take away from those instruction sessions? And outcomes should be meaningful, achievable, observable, and actionable. This is one piece of the bigger assessment puzzle. There are many other ways that you can assess library programs and services and measure your impact, and you might already be doing some of these other things. Measuring outcomes doesn't mean you stop doing those things. It can just be a really key added piece that can help you make a better case for your library. The project outcome, the task force came up with 7 survey topic areas, all of which measure outcomes in these areas, so programs or services related to these topics. And the original surveys were field tested by 54 different institutions across the US about this time last year. And we took feedback from all of those institutions and from that process in developing these final surveys that are available to you. So for each of these surveys, you're measuring outcomes in 4 key areas: knowledge, confidence, application or behavior change, and awareness. And you get quantitative data related to all of those. In addition, the standardized surveys all contain 2 open-ended qualitative questions asking what patrons like the most and what the library can do to improve. And based on PLA's evidence and also early evidence from ACRL, those open-ended questions can be really valuable, and they can also really help you talk about learning outcomes as well. That those same outcomes that are asked about in the quantitative questions often are reflected in the responses that you see in the open-ended questions. So to give you an example of what that looks like, this is the instruction survey, presumably one that will be of interest to many of you. This is the immediate survey. I'll be talking about the different survey types in just a moment. But you can see in bold there, those words show where these questions align with those outcome measures. So this is the standardized set of questions for the immediate survey. In addition, you can add up to 3 open-ended questions, custom questions if you so choose. It's also important to remember that you set the context for these surveys. And that includes both how and when the survey is administered. So you're telling students, for example, please fill out this survey in relation to today's instruction session. So you're setting the context when you administer the survey. You also can set the context when you create the survey within the toolkit by creating a custom program name, even adding internal notes that can help you remember what the program was. And you can also add custom text for an introduction and footer message that goes on the survey itself. So while the questions might look a little bit general, you're setting a lot more of that specific context in terms of the survey. There are 2 types of surveys available in the toolkit. The first is the immediate surveys. As the name suggests, they're designed to be administered immediately at the end of a program. They're pretty easy to set up. All you have to do is plan to create the survey in advance, and then you can choose to administer it either via a URL that you send to patrons or via a PDF that you can then print out and administer. It takes a little bit more work to do the printed surveys, but often we see that they get higher response rates, so sometimes it's worthwhile. The immediate surveys, the quantitative questions, have these 4 Likert scale questions, and then those 2 open-ended questions as well. And again, you can add up to 3 custom questions. The follow-up surveys are a little bit different in format. They're a yes, no, and please explain format for the quantitative questions with those same or similar open-ended questions. And again, as the name suggests, they're designed to be administered after some time has elapsed. So you're going back to your users and saying, so remember that thing that you did a month ago, 2 months ago, earlier in the semester, whenever it was, tell us, did you actually use what you learned from that instruction session? Did you actually use what you learned from that program? They do take maybe a little bit more time to administer because you have to have contact information to be able to follow up with people. But often that is collected either as a matter of course, or you can plan to collect it separately. So for example, if you're going to instruction sessions in particular classes, you might be able to get a class list and therefore send out the survey to everyone in that class. There's different ways you could go about that. You do not have to administer both the immediates and follow-ups. You can choose whichever one will suit your needs the best. But these are the tools that are available to you. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Eric to talk more specifically about how you can use these tools in your institutions.
Okay, hello everybody. This is Eric. As Sara said, we're going to now get to the part where we're going to look at how your current instruction program is being done and how project outcomes will fit into it, or hopefully will fit into it. So to get started, there we are. When you saw the advertisement for this webinar, we suggested that you think about ahead of time and be prepared to share your current instruction outcomes and assessment methods. And so this is the section where we ask that. So if you're interested in doing so, you could let us know what are some of your current instruction outcomes that you're looking for, and then what methods do you use to assess these outcomes. So if you want to. So be thinking about that, and if anyone would like to. Okay, someone's looking at effectiveness and satisfaction. Quizzes in the course management system, that's a good way of doing it. We do some of that as well. They use SurveyMonkey, okay. Reflection question, that's a good one. Pre and post tests. Quizzes, survey, citation analysis, okay. Looking at artifacts, that's a good one as well. Okay, so you can see as you share your ideas with everyone else, just the range of things that people are doing. Some of them quite sophisticated and time consuming, but good nonetheless. So let's take a look as a broader context based on what you shared with how have others in project outcome surveys, how have others used project outcomes surveys. And during the field testing result, we had all 7 surveys available, and you could use any number of these surveys as frequently as you wanted. And it turned out that the top one by a long shot was the undergraduate instruction survey, which tells us a great deal about what is currently important with most libraries. You put a tremendous amount of time and energy and staff and resources into instruction. And if you're like our library, at some point the dean's going to want to know, hey, how's this working? And so this is one way you can do it. So we're under a fair amount of pressure to justify all the resources we use. And here's some examples of specific programs and services that these field testers used as well. For example, the standards instruction sessions for specific classes. As you can see, the range of classes was a tremendous range from anthropology to health sciences, nursing, psychology, social work. Orientation programs, these would be like freshman orientation programs. We call ours University 100. Research instruction. citation and reference instruction, and life skills. So you can see that this one survey has a great deal of flexibility, and as Sara mentioned earlier, you set the context for how people answer these questions, so it makes it a very flexible system for what you're doing. So the question is, with 7 surveys to choose from, how do you choose the right one? Well, it seems a bit odd to throw this into a webinar about assessing instruction, because immediately you're going to say, why you use the instruction one? But the fact of the matter is that may not actually be the case. One way to look at this is to step back and take a look at your learning outcomes and goals and make them very explicit. Then review the definition or the purpose of the surveys, and then review the actual questions and see how they may match with your particular learning outcomes. I see the good question is, what's included in life skills? That's a really good question. I suspect it probably bleeds over to what we would do in our orientation course, such as time management, things like that. So let's start off with practice choosing the right survey. It's easy for me to sit up here and tell you how to do it, but let's have a shot at it. Select one of your instruction outcomes from the previous exercise, and you can see everybody's got a tremendous amount to choose from. Then review the selected survey question list, which I'm going to show you in a minute, which is on the next slide. And then based on that, which survey would be the best to assess your outcome, and then why? And if you could share that with us. Here is the list of 4 selected surveys. There are, and the more astute among you notice, there's actually 7 in the toolkit, but what I did is I removed space and library technology, mainly so you could see the questions on the slide without having to have multiple slides. And since we are focused on instruction, I thought I would include the ones that might be most appropriate for what you have in mind. So take a minute, think about just one, pick one of your instruction outcomes. Many of you probably have more than one if you're like us, and decide which one of these would work the best and why, and let us know. Okay, this is good. We're starting to see a mix of things already. Instruction for the undergraduate or general courses, but research for the graduate level courses. That's a good one. A couple of more research people. Oh, excellent. Events and programs survey for a series of workshops in the business department. Okay, very good. Special collections, definitely. If you're special collections like ours, they also have research methods classes coming in, particularly in history, or in our particular case, Appalachian Studies. And so they would definitely want to know how that turned out. And it's being a little different types of materials, they really would use digital and special collections probably instead of instruction. Events for citation workshops, that would do. So one thing I hope you'll think about is that it's not always immediately clear which one is the best, and it's always worth going through them and thinking about what exactly you want to get from this, and that's why looking at the questions would work. Um, okay, very good, thank you. If you're still not sure, if you're looking at these and you're kind of, torn between which ways to go, review the definition or the purpose, and then you can review the program service examples, and then you could read through some case studies in the online resources, and then you can also ask for ideas in the peer discussion board. All of those appear in the project outcome resources area. For example, here's the survey definitions and examples, and here's all 7. And the forum and the case studies will also be there. So that's an added incentive for you to sign up for the service if you haven't already. So. Okay, and I thought another way of approaching this, since you've all shared what you were thinking you might use, is take a look at a case study. And in particular, I'm going to use a case study from my own university, Radford University. And the idea is to give you an idea of what we do. For example, what are the assessments we normally do? And then based on that, how are we planning to use project outcomes? So to give you some background, we do, as many of you, predominantly 50-minute one-shots, and about 60% of our classes historically have been first and second year courses. Some form of gen ed. We seem to be a university that likes to change our gen ed rather frequently, as well as other first and second year courses. And generally the instruction assessment types cluster in things we want to know, outcomes we want to know. We're looking at library or information confidence. We're looking at authentic assessment of skill application. And then we do observational assessment of teaching skills. So I'll give you a little more detail about these so you have a better idea what I'm talking about. For example, for our library or information confidence, what we're really looking at is participant satisfaction. And the instrument we use is an information confidence survey. It's a locally generated survey of 5 quantitative and 1 general comments question. And we administer at the end of every University 100 freshman orientation library game. We are a required part of the University 100 freshman orientation course. And so what we do is when everybody comes trooping in, I think we do between 75 and 80 sessions every fall, is at the end we decided to have a game, sort of like a Jeopardy style game. We call it the Library Challenge. And then at the end, we have them fill out the survey. Now, we're one of those places where we actually get a higher response rate with print surveys. We have them already on the table when students come in, and they can fill them out anytime during the game or after. Authentic assessment, we use the collect and reflect method. It's something we put together a number of years ago. It consists of 3 parts. There's a initial reflection, which you're looking at the classroom climate and things like, is it 8 o'clock in the morning? Is the technology working like it's supposed to? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? And yes, are some of the classmates hung over? The second part is the success matrix or rubric for evaluating the learning outcomes or objectives. And we are heavy users of worksheets. So we tend to have our learning outcomes tied very closely to a worksheet. And then we can take the worksheet, use the success matrix, and score it whether the students successfully completed it or didn't. And then after you do that, there's the final reflection, which draws on the first parts with the instruction librarian, reflects on what went well and what could be improved and why. The process is somewhat time intensive. So we use a sample of 10% of the courses per semester, which given our current staffing works out to about 12 total in a semester and about 3 per librarian. So we're running about 40 classes a semester. And this is in addition to the University 100, and it's also in addition to the other methods that I'll go through. So we're all running these concurrently. So it's not a matter of, well, one time we do this and one time we do that. So in any given semester, we actually do all of these. Okay. And then we also do citation analysis. This one, okay, now I get to step back just a little bit from what I just said. This one is actually more every other year or every third year, and it's primarily a measure of the success of application skills by the students. And what we do is we draw a sample of papers from professors who are willing to cooperate with us from multiple disciplines and who brought their students in for library instruction. And we have a reflection and success matrix that we use to evaluate the reference list and the internal citing skills of the student and a few other things. It's a fairly involved rubric. And then we administer this at the end of a session. Actually, that's a error. It should be at the end of a semester. My bad. The process is labor intensive and it's very resource intensive. We use local Radford University assessment grants to pay for English GAs to code our student papers. And again, we tend to either do this at the end of the semester, or if we really don't have the resources but we'd like to do it, we'll do it at the end of a year. We tend to do this at the end of the spring semester. That's when most of the writing intensive courses are taught. And then the observational assessment component, this is LEO. LEO stands for Library Exchange and Observation, which is a group of instruction librarians from local area academic libraries. And it is a informal, friendly, and low stakes group. And the rubric results are used to guide follow-up conversation about what worked and what could be improved. How this goes is we're looking to measure teaching or presentation skills of the instruction librarian, and we have a preset rubric that all the participants have agreed to. And you volunteer to share your schedule with all the members of LEO, and then so one librarian can contact you and say, I would like to come observe your History 295 class, for example, on such and such a day at such and such time. They come, they sit in the back of the class, you teach your class, they fill out the rubric, and then you meet afterwards for a friendly meeting, and you go through the rubric and you discuss, this is what I saw, what do you think about this, what do you think about that? And it is voluntary, and usually 2 or 3 times a semester, depending on your schedule and your workload permitting. So you can see we have a pretty wide-ranging assessment program here. So your first thought is, so why would you want to use Project Outcome? Well, actually, I think Project Outcome fits in rather nicely with what we're doing. For example, in the fall, and I'll tell you how we're planning to do it for the next academic year. Okay. And for the fall, we want to replace our locally generated survey. It's okay, but we feel like it could be better. And the advantage of using the Project Outcome survey is we also can benchmark against other people and other institutions, and we can get a better idea of what are we seeing. Is it completely idiosyncratic, or are there broader patterns here as well? And the interesting part is we're not entirely sure if we're going to use the instruction or the events program survey. And if some of you have indicated in your responses to our little exercise earlier, you can see an argument for going either way depending on the types of things. I suspect we'll use the events program survey because it seems to fit our library orientation game format a lot better, but we're still discussing it. Whichever one we choose, we find that the project outcome survey will broaden the scope of the information we receive back from the participants, much more so than our locally generated survey. And in the spring, where we do a lot more course level instruction, a lot more writing intensive, we're going to add an instruction survey component. We're going to sample another 10% of the instruction sessions, another 12 sessions above and beyond what we're doing for the collect and reflect. So that'll give us 24 sessions that we're doing all together. And the project outcomes data will be complementary to what we're collecting with the collect and reflect. That's how we feel that it's going to fit in. So for example, we'll have the 12 from our more detailed collect and reflect. That gives us application. How are they applying? But now with the project outcomes, we'll be able to get how did the participants think this worked? Sort of a, and to me, it's customer satisfaction, but actually I think it's deeper than that. Remember, what the outcomes are being measured is how did the individual participant feel like they've been changed by this? And I think that's going to give us a very valuable student component to match with what we're doing already. I suspect as time progresses that we will find many more ways to integrate it, but that's what we're planning to do so far. And this is a chance for you to say something. While you're thinking about any questions or concerns you may have, and this wrapped up a lot quicker than I thought it would, we want you to keep in touch with us. Keep an eye on the resources page for the project outcomes. It's a growing, developing page, and we plan to add things as we go along. Here's a place you can keep up with news and events and workshops and webinars related to it. Okay, here's a question. How many librarians are involved in your instruction program? There's 4 of us at the moment. We are in the process of hiring, I hope, a 5th. We seem to have hit a snag with HR, but we'll probably get that worked out soon. So, oh, by the way, the questions are not just, if you want to ask about our assessment project, how we're planning to do things, how we do things, how project outcomes. Yes, the slides can be shared soon. Sure, we can share the rubric for teaching observations. How many libraries are involved? Are there UK libraries involved? As far as I know at this point, there are US and Canadian, and I think UK libraries can be added.
Yeah, it's open to all international
Okay.
institutions. And yes, we have several from the UK.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think you can set up auto send. That would be at a local level.
Would you just repeat the question, Eric?
No, I'm sorry. As for follow-up surveys, can they be set up to auto send at scheduled times for the future? That way is you don't forget the auto follow-up. That's something you'd have to do locally. I suspect if you are using, I think Outcome will let you do that. I've never actually had to do it, but I think so. Another thing is some of the research ones have been taking the project outcome questions, putting it into another survey tool like Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, adding their institutional questions, sending it out, taking the results, manually entering the results in the project outcomes database and then keeping the other data for themselves. If you want to do that, I know in both of those softwares you can set up a timed release, so to speak. Can we test project outcome? Can surveys be deleted or will they be kept permanently? I'll leave that for Sara.
Yeah, if you set up an account, I mean, you can just play around. You can delete an entire survey. You can't delete specific responses, but if you want to create a survey just to try it and then delete it, you can do that. I think there were a few other questions specifically about your work above, Eric, if you want to.
Okay, how do you translate data gathered through citation analysis to actionable steps? That's a really good question. What we've found that because it was set at a more university level, the first things we did was contact the professors themselves and let them know how well their students did or didn't do in particular thing, and then work with them to see how they may want to alter how we approach teaching citation and the use of citation analysis resources and things like that. So at our level, that's how we do it. But we also present at the university level so that other faculty who did not participate could benefit perhaps from the trends that we're finding and give an idea of where the students stand and so forth and so on, broader contact. So we're actually running it at 2 different levels. Sorry, I said just one. Can we share the rubrics for university seminar and citation analysis, especially the one that each librarian uses for approximately 4 classes? Yes, I can. That's actually not citation analysis, though. That's one we do. That's a completely different thing. That's a pretty involved thing. I can actually share. You're actually asking me 2 different things, but I can share both, yes. For people using paper surveys, I'm guessing the library is manually inputting this data. Yes, it does increase your workload. However, what I've discovered is a couple things. Not only does it improve your response rate, but also the librarian, I encourage the librarians to hang on to them and read through them at their, as they need them. We do a lot of consecutive sessions for the same course. And so that allows them to have immediate feedback without waiting for analysis. And then it comes to me, and then I do the manual entering. So yes, it does increase the workload, but 12 per semester was not a terrible burden. That's how we sort of arrived at that. Data.
And this is Gina. I just want to jump in on that question. In the back end of Project Outcome, there is an option to bulk enter survey answers. And I have heard anecdotally that if you do receive anonymous paper surveys, it is something that other libraries have had student workers do. Bulk upload anonymous survey results.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm just going to jump back out now.
Please. No, that's fine. Can you talk about data analysis and data exporting? The data analysis is done by project. I assume you're talking about the project outcome surveys. They're done project, I'm tongue-tied today. They're done by project outcomes, and you get to see the results. You can export the data through Excel and do your local analysis if you'd like.
There was a question I think we just missed above, Eric, if you don't mind. I'll just go back to it. It was, if we use the surveys, assessments, or assessments provided by Project Outcome, are we required to share the data that we collect? So you only see data from your institution, and what other institutions are benchmarking against is aggregated data. So no one will be able to tell what your institution score is, but you will see, for all other institutions in your Carnegie class and all others nationwide, you'll see the aggregate scores so that you can compare yourself against those. Go ahead.
Yes. Where are the results stored and for how long? And do the forms allow for demographic questions? I can answer the second one. Second part, do the forms allow for demographic question? The answer is no. That was a whole privacy IRB issue that was just better handled locally. So if you want to collect demographic questions, there is a way of doing that. Probably, but you're going to need to get your local IRB, Institutional Research Board, approval to do that, and you'll have to house that data yourself. Where are the results stored and for how long? I'll ask Sara to jump in on that one.
Sure.
I think I know.
Yeah, it's a online database, and at this point, they are stored forever, for indefinitely. We have plans to keep supporting the toolkit.
Okay,
and I'll just take the next question as well.
Okay.
It's kind of related. If Project Outcome keeps all the data, what are you planning to do with it? We will look at sort of national level or international level data just to keep supporting libraries and what they're doing. We're not going to look, individually at what you're doing, but we will look, for example, we can see what program names people are adding. And so at some point, if it seems like a lot of people are adding program names that suggest a new survey area, we could potentially add an eighth survey. PLA started out with 7 surveys and have just recently added an 8th one. So we'll be looking at use in that sense to make sure we're still supporting what it is that you need to do.
Okay, are there initiatives to add other languages to project outcomes, such as French?
Yes. So right now, the surveys are available in English, Spanish, and French. The Spanish and French translations are unfortunately not professional translations, so I don't know how good they are. Certainly tell us if you try using them. And we are trying to get a functionality built where it would make it easier for us to add new surveys or add all other languages to any of the surveys as well. So if that's something you're doing, definitely get in touch with us. At this point, we'd be happy to share them like just in the resources on the site, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to make it possible to administer the surveys in other languages too.
Okay, what is your, what in your opinion is unique about project outcome data when compared to other assessments you do? I think there's a certain consistency across all 7 that they all hit those basic learning outcomes. Let me see if I can go back to them real quick. That Sara went over earlier on. I don't want to give anybody a headache here. Here. So regardless of what you're doing, whether it's instruction, research, teaching, help, library technology or something, and your quantitative data you're getting is hitting these 4 outcomes. And then I also like having the qualitative data, because even though it adds a little bit of burden to formally analyze it, we find that it sheds light on some of the patterns and trends that we often see in quantitative data. We locally will do at least one open-ended question, but I do like the fact that these are consistent, again, across the surveys, so I know approximately what we're going to get as we go along. See, I'm a big trend person. We don't necessarily use our assessments to evaluate individuals in the department. We just want to improve things, and one way to do that is to see how the program is doing. So we like a lot of trends. We could probably put together something like this, but if Project Outcomes has already done it and field tested it, I have a little more confidence in what we're seeing than sort of putting together a local instrument here and kind of hoping for the best. We don't have the resources to formally test all our questions, so I think this goes a long way to doing that. Now, it is self-reported data, so if that's a concern to you, be aware that that is essentially what it is. But within that context, I find it extremely useful and complements very well what we're doing. Let's see, a sample survey. This one here would be neat to have a sample survey that is assessing, comparing first-year students and graduating seniors. I'm working on ours, updating to the new IL standards. Is anyone else doing this? That's actually how we aimed our citation analysis. We did, in the studies that we've done so far or been able to do, we drew a sample of freshman papers and we drew a sample of senior papers. And it was rather enlightening. And then we did a second batch where we were comparing people who took the our gen ed with transfer students. So there's a lot you can do with that data when you get it. So it's not a survey per se, but you could very easily do that using this project outcomes. I don't see why you couldn't. We serve a very specific population within the university as a way to self-select Carnegie class. Yes, I believe Carnegie classification is one of the benchmark options provided.
Yes, but you can't choose.
Oh, you can't choose.
So it's designated based on the Carnegie classifications data set, and it's assigned by institution.
Without entering demographic questions, is it possible in project outcomes to be able to distinguish this set of responses from librarian A's presentation to class B versus another set of local responses from library X classification to Y? I ask because in Qualtrics, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
the short
please.
answer is yes.
Okay.
You can set the program name, so that's one way to do it. You might say, Instruction 101 - Librarian A as a program name, or you could leave the program name as Instruction 101, and then you can set like an internal description that says, this was the instruction session delivered by Librarian A. So it depends how you want to do it. The advantage of keeping the program name standardized, like Eric was talking about that university level orientation program, if you used the same program name every single time you administer a survey to someone in that class, that means you can then roll up all of that data even within, so you're not just looking at all instruction data, you can look at the instruction survey and then that one class, all the data from that class, even if you've administered multiple surveys, if that makes sense. So it's up to you how you want to manage that, but yes, you can distinguish in that way.
Oh, speaking of surveys, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the survey we have for the end of this course. So if you could take a few moments and fill that one out for us, we would appreciate it. Another question is, how do you present the outcomes to your dean as trends? Yes. It's very interesting about what works for presenting your outcome data. I think the first thing is to find out for the particular stakeholder you're presenting it to, how do they like to see their data? For example, we have an interim provost. I was meeting with her and I was thinking, how do I want to present the data? So I called her office and asked, how does she like to see your data? And there was a long pause. And so I explained, I can do it as tables, I can do it as graphs, I can do it as charts. What does she like to see? And I believe it was charts, bar graphs. Well, why bother? Why would you want to do this? Well, I'm of the opinion that the more you can reduce the barriers between you and what you're trying to get across to somebody, the better you can make your point. The best example is not one from my campus, but it's one I heard in a library school, and that was the dean of the library school was trying to get more money from their provost, and their provost was a chemist by training. So our library school dean was, trying pie charts and graphs and all these things that you would do in a library world, and it just wasn't registering. The provost says, I just don't see what your problem is. And finally it dawned on him that chemists, I wonder how chemists like to see their data. Chemists like data-dense tables. Same data, put into data tables, show to the provost. Provost says, oh my God, you people need some more money. Okay, I can't guarantee you'll get that kind of good reaction, but you can see once you remove the barrier, you presented the information in a familiar form, you get your message across a lot quicker. So I could tell you how I present it to my dean. I definitely do trend analysis. I do line graphs, and I also do a very short summary of the salient features that I want them to be absolutely sure to see. So how long has ACRL committed to funding the project? Oh, outcome, and Sara has answered indefinitely.
And just to go on that last point as well, and the next question, so once you have data in the system, there are a variety of ways that you can look at it within project outcome. There's data visualizations, there's you can build reports, some include the quantitative and qualitative data in those reports. So there's a lot of tools available to you if you are looking for help in terms of how to visualize and how to communicate that data. Eric, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
There we go.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
Faster. So definitely do, if you have more questions, we're happy to be here for a few more minutes if anyone wants to ask questions now, or if you have more questions that you think of tomorrow or next week, the peer discussion board is there, and you can also send us an email at any point. Okay, looks like we'll wrap up. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for filling out the survey. If you took a couple minutes to do so, we'll hope to have more webinars offered in future over the coming years. So definitely stick with us.
Let's see. Here's a quick question. Is there a cost associated with the data visualization reporting? It's part of the project outcomes toolkit. There's a variety of ways you can visualize. Take a look at it. See what your options are. As far as I know, there's no cost to any of this. So
all free.
All free. Now, if you have very, very, very specific visualization needs, that you may have to download the data and put it in your own thing. But I think the range of possibilities are pretty impressive. So I urge you to take a look at them. So.
As you get started doing this, as the fall semester gets going, definitely we'd love to hear from you as well about how you're actually using the tool and using the data. So shoot us a line, or there's a feedback form online if you want to share as well. So thank you. Lots of great ideas were shared today, so hopefully we'll keep hearing more. Okay, not seeing any other questions coming in, so I think do you want to call it a day, Eric?
Yes, thank you all for attending. I hope you got a lot out of it. Please you can contact me through the ACRL project outcome email if you like, if there's a specific question on this presentation. I'll be happy to answer it for you, or at least try. Thank you again.
Eric. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. Have a good afternoon.